the January 6th committee's now gone away, right? Because the Democrats lost the House. And we're getting more and more sort of evidence on the other side. For example, the former Capitol Police chief now has a new book out called Courage Under Fire. He was the chief during the riot, and it's got a lengthy minute-by-minute recounting of the chaos on Jan 6th, and he spreads the blame around for this attack, but really he takes aim at federal intelligence officials who failed to raise alarms before the riot. And a military bureaucracy, he said, waited too long to respond. So he says the FBI, Homeland Security, Department of Defense all had intel that should have had them seeing red, but they instead failed to warn us at the Capitol Police, he says. There were people clearly calling for storming the Capitol, but DHS didn't put out a bulletin. DHS didn't even put out a warning. He says the Pentagon was more concerned about optics than quickly deploying the National Guard during the attack. And really says, like, they hamstrung the Capitol Police from keeping the building safe. And yet, accurately, Matt points out, that portion, there was a group on the January 6th committee devoted to looking into the law enforcement response, the intel response, and it got shelved by the end. By the end of the whole process, the leaders didn't have much interest in that. They really just wanted to focus on Trump. And even Jan 6th committee people who were on those committees got pissed and went to the papers and started leaking how mad they were that this had been tabled. But the law enforcement piece of this has been totally silenced. And you know what? To this guy's credit, he's speaking out. His name is Stephen Sund, about what the truth was there.
Yeah, and that's a classic example of why the Trump phenomenon continues, because people, as much as Trump's detractors want the focus of the story to be on Trump, the personality, Trump, the supposedly the person of limitless corruption who does all these terrible things and says all these, unforgivable things, as you know personally. But the real root of his popularity is the kind of snowballing mistrust that the public has in sort of once popular institutions like the media, like law enforcement, like Congress, like the presidency even. And what Trump does very, very cannily and very instinctually is he channels public mistrust about all sorts of institutions into support for him. He says, look, they're lying to you about all these things. They're also lying about me. I'm on your side. They're not on your side. And look, until these institutions address their own mistrust problem, they're not going to solve the Trump problem, because those two things are connected. And people in Washington have not put those two things together.
That's very interesting. And there's no desire. I mean, of course, people like DeSantis, I think, would like to see the FBI taken down to the studs. However, he's got a long way to go before he's in a position to make that happen. And on the other side, I mean, you've just been through, weeks of this. There's just denialism. There's denialism that there's a problem. And in fact, to the extent there is an issue, they think it's a plus. They like to see the FBI and DHS and the Pentagon and the CIA acting in concert with the Democratic Party's goals, their definitions of misinformation, disinformation, who should be a criminal target like James O'Keefe for trying to look into whether he should publish Ashley Biden's diary, right? Like raiding a journalist's home because he considered publishing the president's daughter's diary that somebody took from her that she left behind in some drug rehab place. I mean, they like it. They're pro all of it, Matt. So you're right. I mean, I guess having come through this, how bad is that problem? Is there any daylight between the Democrats and these policies? Could they be persuaded to step away in the name of restoring faith in the agencies?
I don't think so. I remember, and I've told this story before, but I remember the first times that I covered Trump and being on the riser in the press section. And Trump, this was early in his campaign, he would do things like, oh, look at those bloodsuckers, they hate you, they're lying to you, like, they pretend they're not interested in my campaign, but look at how far they've come for this event. and people would look at us and boo and hiss, and then, within a couple of weeks they were throwing stuff at us, and then it got more intense after that. And I realized right away what the deal was. Like, Trump was identifying the news media as elitist, out of touch, urban liberals for the most part, but more, I think the elitist tag was more important than the liberal tag. And he was succeeding in doing it primarily because it's true. I mean, the people who are in the national news media, I really want to differentiate between the national and the local reporters who actually have beats and go to courthouses and do stuff like that. The national news media is just out of touch with how ordinary people live, and they're in denial about that. They don't see it as a problem. And until they recognize that, there's going to be that gap you talk about. They're just not going to be able to see the phenomena coming their way. And I think I'm beginning to think it's an unbridgeable problem.
Mm-hmm. I mean, certainly with the Democrats in power, it's not going to change. That's just the truth. And we've had so many former FBI, CIA officials come out and lament what those agencies have become and how important those agencies are. I mean, later we're going to talk about this Idaho quadruple murder and how the FBI played this critical role in arresting this suspect. We need the FBI. The FBI does a lot of really good and important things. They were never meant to be like this domestic intel agency as opposed to, an assistant in fighting crime domestically, like another avenue and branch of fighting crime domestically.
Yeah, and I've written a number of stories about this, about how after the church committee hearings in the 70s, there was sort of dramatic reform of the FBI and the CIA, and there was a new guidance that you had to have some kind of hint of criminal activity for the FBI to begin an investigation of a person. Well, after 9/11, they began to roll those guidances back, and the FBI reignited sort of the tradition that had begun under Hoover, where they were, on the one hand, a crime-fighting agency, but that became subordinate to their role as a domestic intelligence agency that just gathers a lot of information, often with no prosecution in sight. They're not necessarily gathering information for a future case. They're just gathering information. I don't think that's a legitimate purpose for them, and I don't think the public likes it either. I think they would prefer to see the FBI doing things like, arresting that Idaho suspect or chasing child pornographers and doing all these other important things that they need to be doing.
So you've heard me talk about Bonner Private Wine Partnership in the past. Listen up, okay? They have incredibly rare Malbecs right now that you must try. If you enjoy a great glass of wine, try these wines from the extreme altitudes of Argentina. The flavor is spectacular. They got blackberry, leather, smoke, little dark cherry. Who doesn't love that? And these wines are nearly impossible to get on your own. The producers deep in the Andes Mountains make limited quantities. The best part is they have cut out the middleman, which means you will not deal with a big markup. Today, we have a new offer that we've never had before. If you visit BonnerPrivateWines.com/MKS, Bonner is BONNER, BonnerPrivateWines.com/MKS, you will not only get the wine for over 50% off plus free shipping, you'll also get a bonus bottle of small batch limited production wine from their exclusive wine cellar. That means you get 4 bottles for the price of 3. It's a deal that's hard to turn down if you are a wine lover like I am. Just visit BonnerPrivateWines.com/MKS to claim your bonus bottle and become a part of America's most unique wine club. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.